When it came to grand manner feasts in medieval times, we're often left to wonder exactly what the upper classes would be eating. Frequently, the subject is covered in brief and general terms, leaving it to our imagination for a more complete picture of these grand occasions. Fortunately, MedievaltoModern has come across a resource which gives a great narrative on the recipes and food presented at a luxurious manner feast in 14th to 15th century England. Published in 1862 by the author Thomas Wright Esquire, this informative description gives us a much clearer image of just how a grand manner feast in Middle Ages England was presented and recipes for what was actually served. These massive feasts and large dinners hosted by the upper classes come to life in this extraordinary account. The aristocracy and noble families were a rare class compared to the overwhelming majority of peasants living during medieval times. Only upper classes had substantial resources required to host such elaborate affairs. In fact, according to some accounts, a large banquet would serve enough food to provide the needs of a peasant family for 1 year. The prestige of the feast itself depended on the rarity and quality of food served by the host. At manor feasts, hosting families served sumptuous quality cuisine to guests, displaying their high status in society. Feasts were a lavish celebration involving plenty of eating and drinking, though were less formal than banquets. In addition, feasts honored lesser events like birthdays and were more about enjoyment than the formality of banquets. Feasts usually had 3 courses, while banquets had 7 or 8, with banquets also offering more dishes with each course. Medieval cooks made courses which were more balanced for flavor and types of food to enhance the eating experience. Dishes prepared by cooks in the kitchen were determined by the availability of food and in which season the feast occurred. Heavy and warming foods like game and domesticated meats were for the winter season. This is also the type of heavy meat fare commonly associated with medieval feasts. Springtime meant no hot foods, so vegetables, eggs, and quail were commonly served. During summer, the moisture provided by cucumbers, apples, and veal were considered pleasurable eating. Guests attending these lavish feasts would pass by soldiers guarding the banquet hall entrance. Important guests, as well as the lord and lady, would all sit at the high table on a raised floor. The ornate chairs for the lord and lady were positioned under a canopy which showed the family's coat of arms and emblems. These important people will look down on guests seated at tables and stools on the floor below. The order in which you were served and the quantity as well as quality of food you received determined your social ranking. Guests of lower status were given both smaller quantities and decreasing amounts of quality fare. Of course, the lord would be served first. Oftentimes, a food tester would appear beside the lord, sampling his food to make sure it was not poisoned. Plenty of servants, as well as pages and squires, would be in attendance. They would serve food and fill large 3-handled drinking cups with ale or wine meant for sharing beverages from the same cup. It should be noted there were no forks provided, so guests would be obliged to bring their own if they had them. Forks at that time were of a 2-pronged variety if available, and not similar to modern forks in appearance. We are pleased to present this detailed account of recipes and food served at medieval English feasts and large dinners. Thomas Wright Esquire uses an informative and entertaining account which provides medieval enthusiasts and those that appreciate historical food invaluable knowledge. We have not altered his narration, using the author's language in its original form. Please note that receipt is the term used here for recipe. At first, he provides a brief history behind medieval English feasts before revealing these recipes. Now, let us begin. Old English Cookery, History of Gourmandise, English Cookery of the 14th and 15th centuries, Bills of Fare, Great Feasts. I have spoken of the ceremonious forms of the service of the medieval table, but we are just now arrived at the period when we begin to have full information on the composition of the culinary dishes in which our ancestors indulged, and it will perhaps be well to give a brief summary of that information as illustrative both of the period we have now been considering and of that which follows. There is a part of the human frame, not very noble in itself, which, nevertheless, many people are said to worship, and which has even exercised at times a considerable influence over man's destinies. Gastrolatry, indeed, is a worship which, at one time or other, has prevailed in different forms over all parts of the world. Its history takes an extensive range, and it is not altogether without interest. One of the first objects of search in a man who has just risen from savage life to civilization is rather naturally refinement in his food, and this desire more than keeps pace with the advance of general refinement until cookery becomes one of the most important of social institutions. During all periods of which we read in history, great public acts of whatever kind, even to the consecration of a church, have been accompanied with feasting. And the same rule holds good throughout all the different phases of our social relations. The materials for the history of eating are, indeed, abundant, and the field is extensive. William of Malmesbury, as we have seen before, tells us the Anglo-Saxons indulged in great feasting and lived in very mean houses, whereas the Normans eat with moderation, but built for themselves magnificent mansions. Various allusions in old writers leave little room for doubt that our Anglo-Saxon forefathers indulged in much eating, but, as far as we can gather, for our information is very imperfect, this indulgence consisted more of the quantity than in the quality of the food, for their cookery seems to have been in general what we call plain. Refinement in cookery appears to have come with the Normans, and from the 12th century to the 16th we can trace the love of the table continually increasing. The monks, whose institutions had to a certain degree separated them from the rest of the world, and who usually, and from the circumstances perhaps naturally, sought sensual gratifications, fell soon into the sin of gluttony, and they seem to have led the way in refinement in the variety and elaborate character of their dishes. Giraldus Cambrensis, an ecclesiastic himself, complains in very indignant terms of the luxurious table kept by the monks of Canterbury in the latter half of the 12th century, and he relates an anecdote which shows how far at that time the clergy were, in this respect, in advance of the laity. One day, when Henry II paid a visit to Winchester, the prior and monks of St. Swithin met him and fell on their knees before him to complain of the tyranny of their bishop. When the king asked what was their grievance, they said that their table had been curtailed of 3 dishes. The king, somewhat surprised at this complaint, and imagining no doubt that the bishop had not left them enough to eat, inquired how many dishes he had left them. They replied 10, at which the king, in a fit of indignation, told them that he himself had no more than 3 dishes to his table, and uttered an imprecation against the bishop, unless he reduced them to the same number. But although we have abundant evidence of the general fact that our Norman and English forefathers loved the table, we have but imperfect information on the character of their cookery until the latter half of the 14th century, when the rules and receipts for cooking appear to have been very generally committed to writing, and a certain number of cookery books belonging to this period and to the following century remain in manuscript, forming the very curious records of the domestic life of our forefathers. From these I will give a few illustrations of this subject. These cookery books sometimes contain plans for dinners of different descriptions, or, as we should now say, bills of fare, which enable us, by comparing the names of the dishes with the receipts for making them, to form a tolerably distinct notion of the manner in which our forefathers fared at table from 400 to 500 years ago. The first example we shall give is furnished by a manuscript of the beginning of the 15th century and belongs to the latter part of the century preceding, that is, to the reign of Richard II, a period remarkable for the fashion for luxurious living. It gives us the following bill of fare for the ordinary table of a gentleman, which I will arrange in the form of a bill of fare of the present day, modernizing the language except in the case of obsolete words. First course: boar's head, enarmed, larded, and bruce for pottage. Beef, mutton, pestles, legs of pork, swan, roasted rabbit, tart. Second course: drope and rosé for pottage. Mallard, pheasant, chickens, farced and roasted. Malachis, bait. Third course: conings, rabbits in gravy, and hare in braisé for pottage. Teals, roasted woodcocks, snipes. Rafoils, baked, flampoints. It may be well to make the general remark that the ordinary number of courses at dinner was 3. To begin then, with the first dish, boar's head was a favorite article at table and needs no explanation. The pottage, which falls under the name of bruce, was made as follows, according to a receipt in the same cookery book which has furnished the bill of fare. Take the umbles of a swine and parboil them, boil them slowly, and cut them in small and put them in a pot with some good broth. Then take the whites of leeks and slit them and cut them small and put them in with minced onions and let it all boil. Next, take bread steeped in broth and draw it up with blood and vinegar and put it in a pot with pepper and cloves and let it boil, and serve all this together. In the second course, drop is probably an error for drawer, a pottage, which according to the same cookery book was made as follows. Take almonds and blanch and grind them and mix them with good meat broth and seethe this in a pot. Then mince onions and fry them in fresh grease and put them to the almonds. Take small birds and parboil them and throw them into the pottage with cinnamon and cloves and a little fair grease and boil the whole. Rosé was made as follows. Take powdered rice and boil it in almond milk till it be thick, and take the brawn of capons and hens, beat it in a mortar, and mix it with the preceding, and put the whole in a pot with powdered cinnamon and cloves and whole mace, and color it with sandalwood. It may be necessary to explain that almond milk consisted simply of almonds ground and mixed with milk or broth. The farcer, or stuffing, for chickens was made thus. Take fresh pork, seethe it, chop it small, and grind it well. Put to it hard yolks of eggs, well mixed together, with dried currants, powder of cinnamon and maces, cubebs, and cloves, whole and roasted. I am still unable to explain the meaning of malakis, the dish which concludes this course. The first dish in the third course, coneys, or rabbits, in gravy, was made as follows. Take rabbits and parboil them, and chop them in gobbets, and season them in a pot with good broth. Then grind almonds, dress them up with beef broth, and boil this in a pot, and after passing it through a strainer, put it to the rabbits, adding to the whole cloves, maces, pines, the kernels of the pine cone, and sugar. Color it with sandalwood, saffron, bastard or other wine, and cinnamon powder mixed together, and add a little vinegar. Not less complicated was the boar in braisé or brassy. Take the ribs of a boar while they are fresh and parboil them until they are half boiled. Then roast them, and when they are roasted, chop them and put them in a pot with good fresh beef broth and wine, and add cloves, maces, pines, currants, and powdered pepper. Then put chopped onions in a pan with fresh grease. Fry them first, then boil them. Next, take bread, steeped in broth, draw it up, and put it to the onions, and color it with sandalwood and saffron, and as it settles, put a little vinegar mixed with powdered cinnamon to it. Then take brawn, and cut it into slices 2 inches long, and throw it into the pot with the foregoing, and serve it all up together. Raffoils were a sort of patties, made as follows. Take swine's flesh, seethe it, chop it small, add to it yolks of eggs, and mix them well together. Put to this a little minced lard, grated cheese, powdered ginger, and cinnamon. Make of this balls of the size of an apple, and wrap them up in the caul of the swine, each ball by itself. Make a raised crust of dough, and put the ball in it, and bake it. When they are baked, take yolks of eggs well beaten, with sugar and pepper, colored with saffron, and pour this mixture over them. Flampennets were made thus. Take good interlarded pork, seethe it and chop it and grind it small. Put to it good fat grease grated and sugar and pepper. Put this in raised paste like the preceding. Then make a thin leaf of dough, out of which cut small points. Fry these in grease. Then stick them in the foregoing mixture after it has been put in the crust and bake it. Such was a tolerably respectable dinner at the end of the 14th century, but the same treatise gives us the following bill of fare for a larger dinner, though still arranged in 3 courses. First course, browet farced and charlotte for pottage, baked mallard, teals, small birds, almond milk served with them, capon roasted with the syrup, roasted veal, pig roasted, endured, and served with the yolk on his neck over gilt herrings, a lèche, a tart of flesh. Second course, brow de Valmaine and viande réelle for pottage, mallard, roasted rabbit, pheasant, venison, jelly, a lèche, urchin, hedgehogs, pomme d'orange. Third course, bourrinego douce and malmen for pottage, cranes, kid, curlew, partridge, all roasted, a lèche, a crustade, a peacock endured and roasted and served with the skin, cockergrease, flampennets, darry oils, pears and syrup. The receipt for making farce browet or browet farcen is literally as follows. Take almonds and pound them and mix with beef broth so as to make it thick, and put it in a pot with cloves, maces, and figs, currants, and minced ginger, and let this all seethe. Take bread and steep it in sweet wine, and draw it up, and put it to the almonds with sugar. Then take the conies, rabbits, or rabbets, young rabbits, or squirrels, and first parboil and then fry them, and partridges parboiled. Fry them whole for a lord, but otherwise chop them into gobbets. And when they are almost fried, cast them in a pot, and let them boil all together, and color with sandalwood and saffron. Then add vinegar and powdered cinnamon strained with wine, and give it a boil. And then take it from the fire, and see that the pottage is thin, and throw in a good quantity of powdered ginger. It is repeated at the end of this receipt that for a lord, a coney, rabbit, squirrel, or partridge should be served whole in this manner. The other pottage in this course, charlotte, are less complex, and was made thus. Take sweet cow's milk, put it in a pan, throw into it the yolks and whites of eggs, and boiled pork, pounded in sage, let it boil till it curds, and color it with saffron. The following was the syrup for a capon. Take almonds and pound them and mix them with wine till they make a thick milk, and color it with saffron, and put it in a saucepan, and put in a good quantity of figs and currants, and add ground ginger, cloves, galangal, a spice much used in the Middle Ages, and cinnamon, and let this all boil, add sugar, and pour it over your capon or pheasant. The lèche in this first course was perhaps the dish which is called in the receipts a lèche lombard, which was made as thus. Take raw pork and pull off the skin, and pick out the skin sinews, and pound the pork in a mortar and with raw eggs. Add to it sugar, salt, raisins, currants, minced dates, powdered pepper, and cloves. Put it in a bladder, and let it seethe till it be done. Then cut it into slips of the form of peas cods. Grind raisins in a mortar, mix them with red wine, and put to them almond milk, colored with sandalwood and saffron, and add pepper and cloves, and then boil the whole. When it is boiled, mix cinnamon and ginger with wine, and pour on it, and so serve it. Brouet of Almaine, which comes in with the second course of this dinner, was a rather celebrated pottage. It was made in the following manner. Take conies and parboil them and chop them in gobbets, and put them with ribs of pork or kid into a pot, and seethe it. Then take ground almonds and mix them with beef broth, and put this in a pot with cloves, maces, pines, mixed ginger, and currants, and with onions, and boil it, and color it with saffron. And when this is boiled, take the flesh from the broth and put it in. And take alkanet. Alkanet is explained in the dictionaries as the name of a plant, while bugos, it appears to have been used in cookery to give color. And fry it, and press it in the pot through a strainer, and finally add a little vinegar and ground ginger mixed together. The composition of viande royale was as follows. Take Greek wine or Rhenish wine and clarified honey, and mix them well with ground rice, ginger, pepper, cinnamon, and cloves, saffron, sugar, mulberries, and sandalwood. Boil the mixture and salt it, and take care that it is thick. Pomme d'orange was quite a different thing to what we should expect from the name. It was made as follows. Take pork liver, pound it well raw, and put to it ground pepper, cloves, cinnamon, saffron, and currants. Make of this balls like apples, and wet them well in the white of eggs, and then put them in boiling water, and let them seethe. When they have seethed a while, take them out, and put them on a spit, and roast them well. Then take parsley, and grind it, and wring it up with eggs through a strainer, and put a little flour to it. And with this endore the balls while roasting, and if you will, you may take saffron, sandalwood, or indigo to color them. Endore was the technical term of the kitchen for washing over an article of cookery with yolks of eggs or any other liquid, to give them a shiny appearance to its exterior when cooked. Both the pottages in the third course are rather elaborate ones. The following was the process of making boar in eggerdouse, a word which of course means sour, sweet. Take dates, washed clean, and currants, and boil them, and pound them together, and in pounding put cloves in them, and mix them up with vinegar, or clary, or other sweet wine, and put them in a fair pot, and boil it well. And then put to it a half a quartern of sugar, or else honey, and half an ounce of cinnamon in powder. And in the setting down, take a little vinegar, and mix with it a half an ounce of ground ginger, a little sandalwood and saffron, and in the boiling put minced ginger to it. Next, take fresh brawn, and seethe it, and then cut it in thin slices, and lay 3 in a dish, and then take half a pound of pines and fry them in fresh grease, and throw pines into it. And when they are thoroughly hot, take them out with a skimmer, and let them dry and cast them in the same pot, and then put the syrup above the brawn in the dishes and serve it. Mamen was made according to the following receipt. Take almonds and blanch them and pound them and mix them with water or wine. And take the brawn of capons or pheasants and pound it small and mix it with the other, and add ground rice and put it in a pot and let it boil. And add powder of ginger and cloves and cinnamon and sugar. And take rice and parboil it and grind it and add it to them and color it with sandalwood and pour it out in dishes. And take the grains of pomegranates and stick in it or almonds or pines fried in grease and strew sugar over it. The following is the manner of making the crostade, mentioned in the third course of this bill of fare. Take chickens and pigeons and small birds and make them clean and chop them to pieces and stew them all together in a good broth made of fair grease and ground pepper and cloves, and add verjuice to it and color it with saffron, and then make raised crusts and pinch them and lay the flesh therein, and put to it currants and ground ginger and cinnamon, and take raw eggs and break them and strain them through a strainer in the pottage of the stew and stir it well together, and pour it into the raised crusts above the flesh, and then place the covers on them and serve them. The process of serving a peacock with the skin also requires some explanation. The skin was first stripped off, with the feathers, tail, neck, and head, and it was spread on a table and strewn with ground cumin. Then the peacock was taken and roasted and endured with raw yolks of eggs, and when roasted, and after it had been allowed to cool a little, it was strewn into the skin, and thus served on the table, always with the last course, when it looked as though the bird were alive. To make a coca grease, you must take an old cock and pull him and wash him and skin him all but the legs and fill him full of the stuffing made for the pomme d'orange. And also take a pig and skin him from the middle downwards and fill him full of the same stuffing and sew them fast together and seize them. And when they have seized a good while, take them up and put them on a spit and roast them well, and endure them with yolks of eggs mixed with saffron. And when they are roasted, before placing them on the table, lay gold and silver foil on them. Flamping had been already explained. Pears and syrup were merely boiled in wine and seasoned with sugar and spices. The 15th century especially was celebrated for its great feasts, at which the consumption of provisions was enormous. The bills of expenses of some of them have been preserved. In the 6th year of the reign of Edward IV, AD 1466, George Neville was made Archbishop of York, and the account of the expenditure for the feast on that occasion contains the following articles: 300 quarters of wheat, 300 tons of ale, 100 tons of wine, 1 pint of hippocras, 104 oxen, 6 wild bulls, 1,000 sheep, 304 calves, the same number of swine, 400 swans, 2,000 geese, 1,000 capons, 2,000 pigs, 400 plovers, 100 dozens of quails, 200 dozen of the birds called rees, 104 peacocks, 4,000 mallards and teals, 204 cranes, 204 kids, 2,000 chickens, 4,000 pigeons, 4,000 crays, 204 bitterns, 400 herons, 200 pheasants, 500 partridges, 400 woodcocks, 100 curlews, 1,000 egrets, more than 500 stags, bucks, and roes, 4,000 cold venison pasties, 1,000 parted dishes of jelly, 3,000 plain dishes of jelly, 4,000 cold baked tarts, 1,500 hot venison pasties, 2,000 hot custards, 608 pikes and breams, 12 porpoises and seals, with a proportionate quantity of spices, sugared delicacies, and wafers or cakes. On the inthronation of William Worm as Archbishop of Canterbury in 1504, the 20th year of the reign of Henry VII, a feast was given for which the following provisions were purchased: 54 quarters of wheat, 20 shillings worth of fine flour for making wafers, 6 tons or pipes of red wine, 4 of claret wine, 1 of choice white wine, and 1 of white wine for the kitchen, 1 butt of Malmsey, 1 pipe of wine of Osey, 2 tierces of Rhenish wine, 4 tons of London ale, 6 of Kentish ale, and 20 of English beer, 33 pounds worth of spices, 300 lings, 600 codfish, 7 barrels of salted salmon, 40 fresh salmon, 14 barrels of white herrings, 20 cades of red herrings, each cade containing 600 herrings, which would make a total of 12,000, 5 barrels of salted sturgeons, 2 barrels of salted eels, 600 fresh eels, 8,000 whelks, 500 pikes, 400 tenches, 100 carps, 800 breams, 2 barrels of salted lampreys, 80 fresh fresh lampreys, 1,400 fresh lamprey, 120,000 salted coners, 200 great roaches, a quantity of seal and porpoises, with a considerable quantity of other fish. It will be understood at once that this feast took place on a fish day. End of account. Great feasts and large dinners at manor homes in medieval England were often elaborate and detailed occasions. These elegant, luxurious events appear to have peaked in regularity during the 14th and 15th centuries. Throughout the 16th and early decades of the 17th century, they gradually declined in popularity and disappeared in presence with the English Civil War. With the restoration of the monarchy, the upper classes replaced great feasts and banquets with less lavish and ornate dinners and recipes. Thank you for supporting us at Medieval to Modern. Please be sure to watch our next episode or one shown at the end of this video. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and spread the word about this channel so we can create more exciting content. I wish you good tidings as we remember that sharing knowledge has been a noble deed throughout the ages.